Hello, my fellow readers. I Dark Symphony 777 with the final fanfic of 2025. It is Missing Link by Metul Bard. It is a loud family fanfiction. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts on the story, and finally, some my opinion. My opinion is not indicative of everyone's world, so please respect that. So, what is this plot about? Well, in order to understand this plot, there's one thing you need to at least know about. This story takes a lot of cues from Ace Attorney. Specifically the Ace Attorney Investigations spinoff sort of deal. Is it? Wait, is Investigations a spinoff? I don't know. In essence, Ace Attorney Investigations is completely different from the traditional Ace Attorney formula. How do I know it's specifically referencing Investigations? Because there's two chapters that specifically reference Logic Chest, which is an actual mechanic in the investigation games. I have Investigations. I haven't played yet, but I have Investigations. I know about the Logic Chest. I'm sorry, I can't. I have to at least have to go on this small little tangent. Just bear with me. I just love the fact that in a game franchise where like the main characters have like all these supernatural powers, Miles Edrich's power is logic. it just screams. It's just kind of funny. But anyway, what is the plot of Missing Link? Well, the plot of Missing Link involves this movie that is based off about an ape. I'm still wrapped up on the logic thing. My bad. Give me a second. There we go. A trailer for a movie based off a savvy quote unquote, not totally ripping off Miles Edgeworth, is airing, and Clyde and Lincoln are actually watching it. Lincoln is excited because, hey, this comic I worked so hard on that I incorporated my sisters into, they're gonna be, they get like all this attention and stuff. Like, oh, I'm gonna go out because it turns out it was very late and Lincoln's like almost missing his curfew. Heads home, takes a little side station to kind of get something for his sisters, and promptly gets kidnapped. And then the rest of the story is basically the sisters, all the sisters, including Lily, trying to find out who kidnapped Lincoln and trying to rescue him. It's a very simplistic plot. Usually Ace Attorney stories are very, very complex, depending on like which cases they are. So despite this being based off Ace Attorney, it's not really Ace Attorney in complexity, because the whole point of Ace Attorney games is they're just going to be very, very complex. Like if you, regardless, like you say, like, I don't know, Turnabout Blaze, the actual boss fight in Turnabout Blaze is like so long. There's actually a save point halfway through the boss. That's how long that boss is, and that's how complex that boss is. And he's also a tree! Sorry, I couldn't resist. Throwing a dig to that. In essence, it's not a horribly complex plot because it's very straightforward. Because it's just, okay, all the sisters have to split up into teams of two. There is Lenny and Lori, there's Lisa and Lily, there's Lana and Laura, Luna and Luann, and then forgot the sporty Lynn and Lucy. There they are. I almost goofed up on that. And basically, all have their kind of roles to play as the investigation goes on, and that's very fine on paper, but the execution is not the best, and it boils down to one specific thing: the actual writing itself. Why? I need to ask I need to ask the author this. Metul Bard, I'm gonna send you a link. I need to ask you, why did you make this story a first person story? Because this does not come off as a first-person story. It really doesn't. And that's ultimately the big issue I have with Missing Link. It's not just the fact that it's first person, it's very bad first person. It's the type of first person that reads like the author is trying to mash first person and third person writing together, and it comes off as such a horrible, clunky mess. Now, I get the whole point of why the author is trying to incorporate this, because the author is trying to incorporate the narration style for Loud House. Usually, if you ever saw any episodes of Loud House, there is usually probably once episode. I don't know if it happens in every episode because I haven't seen every episode of Loud House, where Lincoln would actually randomly turn to the audience, basically breaking the fourth wall and kind of explain the situation going on with like his sisters or the situation involving the episode. It's his way of kind of just depositing exposition to the author and like the complexities of having 10 sisters and being a guy, and just be lucky you're not one of the idiots who kind of ship him with the sisters. Then again, mostly people just ship him with Lynn. I think that's actually like the most popular ship in the fandom, Lincoln and Lynn, because they're like the closest in age. But regardless of the whole shipping, the whole incest thing, this has a purpose of in the show, and that's exactly what the author is trying to emulate. It doesn't work because of how it's presented in the show. It's very much a visual style. So there's lots of shows and comic books and video games that incorporate this sort of style, where they just randomly look towards the audience. It's more common in like TV shows and cartoons, where they turn to the audience and kind of interact with the audience to kind of tell them what's going on. This is shown throughout a lot of media. Like, for instance, not only Loud House, there's Blue's Clues, Dora the Explorer, House of Cards, She-Hulk. If you want to dig in the comics, Deadpool's whole thing is breaking the fourth wall. He regularly does that. There is a lot of tried and true examples of that. Here's the issue. Whatever this story does it in literature, it's never done in first person because it's very clunky done in first person, because the simple fact, first person operates under a different rule set and a mindset than third person. It makes sense to do it in third person because the whole thing, because you're basically acting as an outside window. So that way, when the author or whatever the character, like for instance Lincoln, if a story does have Lincoln break the fourth wall, it makes a lot more sense, not only narratively, but it also makes sense structurally, because it is directly looking and communicating with us. With first person point of view stories, you're technically already inside the character's head, because that's essentially how first person stories are supposed to work. That's basically the one thing they have over third persons. Third persons tend to be more flexible. They tend to be better with world building. But when it comes to a character focused thing, if you want to make a good character focused story, you tend to make them first person. That's basically what first persons are good at. That's their niche. That's what they do. So having the author have each of the characters, it's more like, it's most obvious when you're looking at through the perspective of Luann, because she cracks like a lot of jokes and then she asks you, like, "Hey, you think it's funny?" It kind of breaks up the flow when you're already inside the character's head, quote unquote, and then they start talking to you, because that's not how that would work. That is very clunky and doesn't really flow right. The same thing can be said with every chapter takes place from a different sister's perspective. There are 11 total perspectives throughout the entire story. All the sisters and Lincoln. But Lincoln only is the perspective of the first and last chapter. The rest, everything in between, each chapter switches between the sisters. Again, that's a good idea. The problem is it just doesn't flow right, simply because when it comes to first person point of view stories, you typically want to focus on like one, maybe two characters. You don't, by constantly switching, you're not really getting a feel for the character. You're just kind of flip flopping between each characters, and yeah, the writing changes to kind of match each character. Like for instance, this story, this first chapter is told from Lenny's point of view, and then like I don't know, yeah, this one takes place from Lisa's point of view, so the writing style actually slightly changes. Like this one's more technical, and then you have the baby. It's like where the hell's the baby? Which one is the crud? I completely forgot what chapter the baby is. Lily. There's even a chapter that focuses on Lily, and you know what? I need to actually show you this right here. Chapter 12. And it just randomly turns purple prose because, like, oh, you're expecting a baby to not be smart. No, it's just going to be just incredibly flamboyant, which does make sense from each character except for Lily, but you can kind of do whatever you want with Lily because she's a baby. She can't really talk. So, okay, there's stuff you can do with that, but it doesn't really get us interested into knowing the minds of the characters because the moment you like try to get invested, chapter changes. Now you're looking at through the eyes of a different sister. If it was like from one or two sisters, like for instance, if the story took place entirely from Laurie's point of view, like because I believe like canonically she actually does know some lawyer stuff from watching Legally Blonde, so she does get to know some lawyer stuff. That would make a lot of sense because you get to see the entire story from Laurie's point of view and how she interacts and how she treats like her sisters and the case and like the evidence and try and help her and figure things out together. But it's just very clunky when it constantly switches to each sister each chapter because you're not really getting into the character. Like you're not really able to truly see through their eyes because it just happens so fast. In opposite, if the story was third person, none of this issues would exist because third person again, you have you're just simply more flexible in how you approach the story, how you approach the characters, how you approach everything. Again, third person and first person technically have different rules, like do different things. And that's ultimately the plot. Like a large part of the plot is just kind of talking about the first person, but that kind of tells you how badly bungled this story is simply because it's in first person. If the story like it would legitimately fix everything if the story was third person. Like the characters, the plot, because again, the plot would just flow much better if it was third person. Just everything could simply be fixed if it was third person. When it comes to the overall plot, I do think the plot is fine enough. It's just basically, okay, our brother's missing. Let's do an investigation behind our parents and behind the cops' backs to try and find them. And hopefully we can catch the guy who basically took them. It's very simple, cut and dry. I don't think it's bad. It just doesn't really flow that well because of the first person. When it comes to the characters, I like the characters. They're very true to the characters, again, except for Lily, but you can kind of do whatever you want with Lily because again, she can't talk, so if you want to do the whole grand eloquent thing, yeah, go for it. I don't have a problem with that. When it comes to the original character, or in essence, the original villain, Dirk O'Donnell, I'm kind of mixed on him. I like the concept of Dirk as a villain. He's basically this abusive father who is so enamored with the idea of subverting expectations for a story that he actually writes out everything that everyone does around him. Like, oh, you have to go to the bathroom at this time, but I have to go to the bathroom now. Cut! And he just, I love the idea. It's very Ace Attorney like because Ace Attorney characters are very quirky. So give him like like an Ace Attorney character bent to him. It's the most natural thing in the world, and I love how super obnoxious is. He's basically like a very toxic guy, and even then his like motivation for the thing is like it's stupid, but it's kind of funny. Basically, okay, Kirk's motivation for kidnapping Lincoln is he wanted to. He did like this. He found out a friend of his, who's basically the writer of the Ace Savvy comics. He's doing a contest. Like I want a contest so I could like accept fan creations of fan comics, and I would make that into an official comic. Uh, Dirk's daughter was originally supposed to give up the comic. Like she wrote a comic, she did the whole thing. Dirk, however, basically didn't like that. Rewrote his own comic, which is this super gritty, dark, gory take of a Savvy, and donated, and then did this whole big kitten caboodle media scrub of like advertisement and stuff like that. However, the writer actually picked Lincoln's comic simply because it's actually more faithful to the source material, and Dirk got big mad at that. So it's like, and he found out that this comic's gonna get a movie based on it. So he becomes the director, and he proceeds to kidnap Lincoln specifically so he can try and force the movie to become his comic. It's very petty. It's so ridiculous and petty that it kind of goes from bad to good, because like that's like something you see from Ace Attorney. Like Ace Attorney has like ridiculous villains too, so it's like okay. However, when it comes to Dirk himself, my issue with Dirk is the fact he really only shows up twice. For if you want a good mystery, because that's essentially what this is, a good mystery usually has a bunch of red herrings that we kind of, and you have to try and figure things out, and it's just so painfully obvious that it's Dirk who's the villain. Like, yeah, some mysteries are like very, very are more like inverse mysteries where like okay the bad guy's very obvious, but it's more figuring out how he did the things he did, which is what the story technically is sort of an inverse mystery. It's like okay, it's very telling because of everything kind of tracing back to the movie. It's like okay, it's probably like at the moment you meet Dirk, it's like oh, it's probably him, but it's more okay, how did he get around, do all this stuff that's like so that way they can be able to take him down, which is fine. Like it's just not really that well done because he just doesn't. He shows up all twice. He shows up halfway through the story, and then he shows up at the end of the story to kind of act like the final boss sort of deal. And sure, in those two instances, he shows off a very entertaining character, a very entertainingly goofy character of like constantly like he's like, oh, this is not in the script, cut, and being so controlling, like he's like acting like a director offset. It's just real. The character works. It's just it really would have made more sense for him to like show up more often, especially since you know he is the bad guy. And even like the final fight is just kind of limp because it's like okay, it's like one guy versus like 9 kids. Well, 8 kids and adult because Larry is like an adult. It's fine. I think it's fine. I think he's fine. His daughter really also should have showed up more. She only shows up twice, 3 times, and it's not her character's not really that explored. Even like the whole abusive thing kind of weirdly comes out of nowhere. Like could have been built up better, but it's like it's fine. But again, that's more tied in the fact that Dirk doesn't show up that much. I think it's fine. The sisters are good. I liked a lot of the miscellaneous characters like Tetherby and the cops helping Lisa and Lily out. Hawk and Hawk and Hank. and then, like, their whole thing with Lin, but that feels like a completely separate story. That, like, okay, they're just kind of loosely. They're only really connected because they're the ones that specifically kidnapped Lincoln, and but they were doing under Kirk's orders. It's kind of confusing. That I think it's fine. I think ultimately all the characters are fine. But like I said, my issue is just Kirk and his daughter should have showed up more. Grammar wise, I think the grammar's fine. Again, this is more. This is I just like the touch of each focus. I actually shift changing how the writing style is done. So you actually see a very fast amount of different writing styles, which shows that the author actually knows his stuff. Pacing wise, I as much as I would want to complain about the pacing, I think the pacing is fine ultimately. Again, I do think it should have been. Maybe you could make an argument that the story should have been longer to kind of sell the mystery aspect, but I think it's fine for what it is, especially since Lincoln wasn't really in danger. Maybe we had like a chapter or two like centered around Lincoln kind of communicating with Virginia. Maybe that could have been something, but it's fine. It's fine. I think the pacing's fine. I think the sen- I think as much as the story was like shoved into first person, I think the author did as well as he could with what he had. Yeah, that's it. Here's the thing. When it comes to recommending the story, I can't recommend the story. It's not because I don't want to. It's just the first person perspective is such a confusing and disastrous element of the entire story. It drags the story that down because of the simple fact that it makes the entire story clunky. And it that's kind of the sad thing because it's such an easy fix. Just change the perspective. That's all that really needs to be done. Changing from first person to third person, you're done. Sure, the author would probably have to rewrite everything. And I think this author is more used to writing in first person than third person. So it's probably gonna be like very awkward in how to do it. But ultimately, I can't recommend this story because the first person point of view is just such a big issue that it prevents me from really wanting to recommend it. I do think a lot of the ideas are good, and I do like the ideas of the whole mystery of like the Ace Attorney inspirations. But ultimately, I do think a lot of the areas are severely weakened because of the perspective, and that just drags it just hard enough that I can't recommend it. Do I have a favorite part? I don't really have a favorite part. If there's anything I fixed, if you wanna, like, the easiest thing is just switch this to third person. Like that, it literally, it just the perspective change would just fix everything. But if the author wants to stick to first person, you need to stick to a very very small group. You can't do you can't do all 10 sisters. That is too much and too many perspectives that you have to work with. Limit them. Maybe if you want to be smart, limit it to just Lenny and Lori because those are two. They would be the two oldest, and because of the whole parents being scared, they probably would only really let like Lenny and Lori go. You'd have to get rid of the whole Lynn side plot, but that'd be the only thing you would have to really change, and then just have the story just take place from Lenny and Lori's point of view. Like just switch between the two. You would have a much better balance of character focus because now you have Lori, who's basically a dumb blonde, who also knows some lawyer stuff, and you have Lenny, who's basically acting as like the sisters, like who basically wants to save her brother and just acting as a panic and wanted to prove that she can do this to her parents to kind of say, I'm the oldest sister, it's my responsibility, sort of deal. There's a lot you can do. Granted, you'd have both ideas. You would literally have to rewrite the story. I can't think of any way to fix the story without having to rewrite. And I still don't like that. I would much rather prefer the story to stay as close as it can to the original intent of the author. But in this case, it's either idea. The story has to be rewritten. And I think that's really it. So yeah, that is Missing Link by Mitchell Bard. This has been Dark Symphony 777, and cut.